Welcome back. Now, days after the ceremonial salute to India's living legend Ratan Tata, the goodbyes and tributes are still pouring in. The latest is a very heartfelt tribute that has come in from Tata Sons chairman N. Chandrasekaran, who remembered him not only as someone with varied interests from hotels to cars, but also a humanist who felt deeply and noticed much. We have put out an excerpt from that on your screens, which you can read. But an important facet about Mr. Tata's personality, which sometimes goes underlooked because most people look of him and achievements as to what he did at an early age. But even in his recent years, his friendship and the inspiration he provided to some of India's Gen Next entrepreneurs is to be studied. Listen to some of the responses coming in from people you'd probably know very well before I go in to my guests.
In 2017, he called me and said, Bhavish, come to Mumbai. I want to show you something. I want to take you somewhere. And I said, I don't know what Mr. Tata wants to show me. So I went down to Mumbai. And, this is the nature of the man. He took me with him in his plane from Mumbai to Coimbatore, showed me his personal project that he was running in Coimbatore for electric vehicles. He had, as a side project, out of the Tata group, he had built an electric Nano. And he took me in that electric Nano on a test drive, and he told me, Bhavish, this is the problem with this vehicle and engineering this thing. He told the engineers to fix the tuning, this, that. And I was shocked. This is here a man who is retired, who is the top businessman of India, taking me, a young entrepreneur, all the way to Coimbatore just to show me this EV company of his, or EV project of his. And, since then I got interested in EVs, and I said, sir, I want to start a company in EVs.
I remember I got a call out of the blue from, someone who knew both of us and said that there is a ultra high net worth individual who would like to meet you. He's read about you, and he's looking to make some investments. And there was no way I could have in my wildest dreams imagined that it would be Mr. Tata, and that name was really revealed to me literally a day before the meeting. And I met him in 2014 in our early days of building our business. And within, I remember vividly, I was sitting in his office. He was busy with another meeting. And I waited maybe 5-7 minutes. And when he came in, he, the first thing he did was he was like, I'm really, really sorry. I've kept you waiting. I mean, this is Mr. Tata, and I'm some, 30-year-old entrepreneur. The amount of respect he gave everyone around him, whether it's the watchman or whether it is his assistants, whether it is a founder, whether it is another of his peers or a big businessman, he gave everyone a lot of respect, and I think set such a great example.
I am delighted to be joined right now by Ameya Prabhu, noted author and entrepreneur, and also Dr. Sudhir Mehta, chairman and MD of Pinnacle Industries. I'm going to keep this short, gentlemen, and I'm going to come to you one by one and ask you about what has been your takeaway as someone who's a Gen Next entrepreneur, someone who's heading Indian business into the next, or entrepreneurship into the next decade. What have been the lessons you would have learned from Ratan Tata if you've interacted with him personally, or if you've been inspired by some of his ideals? Why don't I start with you, Ameya Prabhu?
Thank you, Ritangshu. I think Mr. Tata is someone who touched all of us. And when I found out he passed away last week, I think I almost had to stop the car and shed a tear, because I think we all feel so connected. And I'm today in Vijayawada in Andhra Pradesh, visiting here for a day, and we had a Andhra Pradesh Chamber of Commerce meeting, which I was addressing. And before we started the meeting, everyone said, let's take a moment of silence for the passing of Mr. Ratan Tata. And I think that shows you the amount of respect people had for him throughout India, throughout the world. And I think, one anecdote which I remember, Mr. Tata knew my parents well, he knew my father well, and he had come home for breakfast once. And of course, my mother, like any Indian host, when she hears someone's coming, she makes 10 things, she made poha, she made this, she made that. Yeah. And Mr. Tata came and he said, can I get a boiled egg, please? And a boiled egg, he wanted one boiled egg. And my mom, of course, got him the boiled egg. And of course, she was a bit disappointed. She's like, Mr. Tata, can I get you something else? She's like, because you're asking so sweetly, could you mind giving me a buttered toast? Because my mom used to butter my toast and give it to me. So, my mother always speaks of that so fondly. She's like, even such a great man, someone my parents looked up to, all of us thought of him as a hero in ethical leadership, in ethical business, or just how to be a good human being, how to be a good, not how to be good to animals, how to just lead your life. Sorry, I'm choking up when I say that, but even someone like him has ultimately, he might be this larger than life superhero personality, but ultimately he's also a human being. So my mother was, when he passed, as my mom said, let's of course it's sad that such a great man has passed, but let's celebrate his life with stories such as this.
Absolutely. Dr. Mehta, the buzzwords, as Ameya kept mentioning, the words which kept propping up when the world paid tribute to Mr. Tata was ethical cooperation, a great human being, someone who was kind to everyone around him, someone who was kind to animals, someone who cared deeply about the environment. In an era where ESG and sustainability have become such artificially generated buzzwords for corporates here, here's Mr. Tata who laid the way for us long before we realized our Indian corporates understood the importance of going down this path.
Yes, so Mr. Tata was not just an individual. Literally, he's an institution. I think he exemplified the best of India in not just one respect, but if you look across the spectrum, I think for many of us who grew up post-independence, we were always looking at the heroes of the past. And here was Mr. Tata, larger than life, but at the same time, very human, very accessible, very available, and thinking of India above all else. He, of course, has the business side of him, which was all of the fantastic things that he did. Again, breakthrough innovations, whether it's the automotive industry, whether it's engineering. I mean, his presence was across all major sectors of the economy. And what he built was not just companies, he built institutions which are really going to be there for a very long time, and not just in India, but really take the flag of India all around the world. That was one part of him. But I think the most important part that he taught all of us in business was really that as business persons, he was the custodian of for the next generation. Business was not something which was to be done solely for the purpose of making money. Creation of wealth was important because it helps virtually the nation to progress. But wealth is something which really enables the ecosystem to move forward. And I think the Tata companies have always been exemplifiers, and he led this from the front. And this was not just something which was done to show. This was not something this was part of the fundamental ethos of Mr. Tata. And I think that is the one message that we can learn when we look at the West and when we look at India. The difference is that business in India must be a force for good. And Mr. Tata always exemplified that. So to me, that was the single defining factor which all of us will remember. And it's not just innovation which matters, it's not just creating job which matters, but eventually it's creating value for all stakeholders which matters.
Dr. Mehta, you mentioned how Mr. Tata kept investing in the next generation in terms of technology, in terms of future directions. But you also invested heavily in the next generation in terms of human capital also. We heard the statements coming in from Bhavish Aggarwal, who's the CEO of Ola, and Kunal Bahl, who's the CEO of Snapdeal, how at a very nascent age, he was quick to spot talent, he was quick to spot potential, and he was quick to invest in their abilities and give them a firmer footing. Nowhere, the best example I can think of is what we did with Shantanu Naidu. I mean, a general manager in his 30s is something which is unheard of in most of corporate India, especially in a legacy company like Tata. But that close personal friendship which Mr. Tata built with Mr. Naidu, starting from investing in a startup which had a heart about reaching out to senior citizens, to a point where he was made the general manager at such a young age. This definitely is a lesson for corporate India, that you don't necessarily have to look at a candidate's experience in order to give him the position which he or she may deserve out of sheer merit.
Absolutely. It's ultimately the people who matter. And I think Mr. Tata understood this better than anybody else, whether it was a large corporate where when he came in, he got a whole new set of people, which then became the long-term inheritors of those companies, to young startups, many of whom you spoke about today, who are the young people that he encouraged, to all of the corporate executives. And I think his reach was more. I live in Pune, and if you speak to somebody in Tata Motors or any of the Tata Group companies, normally in a company of 20,000 people, the founder or the owner will not have a connect with each and every person, but everybody uniformly felt that Mr. Tata was part of their family. So here was a senior family member, whether you are a young associate in the company or you're a CEO in the company, Mr. Tata was somebody that you looked up to. And at the same time, I think some of his personal qualities, which was as endearing, whether it was his love for pets, whether it was all of the small gestures, and eventually humility. This is what came across in everybody's interactions with him. He did not treat a person by their wealth, or didn't, let's say, if you're in a line, he would not start by meeting the person who's the most important. He would start by meeting each of the persons at
Yeah.
the same level playing field. And this is ultimately what matters.
Absolutely. Well, Ameya Prabhu and Dr. Sudhir Mehta, thank you so much for joining us. Now, Dr. Mehta mentioned, and of course, that's something which N. Chandrasekhar also mentioned about Ratan Tata's undying love for pets and his humility here. I also earlier also spoke to Gurcharan Das, noted author and economist himself, about his lasting memories of Ratan Tata. I leave you on the urban debate with his statement. Thanks for watching. Shreya Upadhyay joins you on the other side. Stay tuned.
I was on the board of one of the Tata companies, and at one morning we were holding a board meeting at Bombay House, and Freddie Mehta, who was the chairman of our board, told us that he had invited a guest to join us, and he referred to him affectionately as Ratan. Now, I did not know that he was a Tata. But what the impression that the young man made on me was quite was to make sure that I would never identify him as a mighty scion of the Tata. And about 15 minutes into the meeting, a dog walks into the meeting. I think it's a credit to the board that none of us thought necessary to comment on having a four-legged board member suddenly appear. And the dog sat down and near Ratan's chair. And only later, I discovered that he was actually a stray dog that Ratan had picked up and had given temporary shelter to him in his office. So here was a brief incident which told a lot about a person.